of one of our authors that for a long time had been placing an ad in the newspaper. She would invest about $1,500 a week to run this ad in the newspaper. And it consistently produced some results for her. Typically, she would receive about 15 new leads every time she would place the ad. Well then, one little thing changed. The size of the ad remained the same. The basic content of the ad remained the same. Her services remained the same. But what she did was she threw in an offer for a free book. The only thing that she changed about the ad was that it featured her soon-to-be-released book. Obviously said she's the author of it. And it made the offer of receiving a free copy of her book. Remember, Thomas was talking about how good of an idea it is to offer people something for free. Well, books have a very, very high perceived value. People value books very high. And so the only thing that changed in this lady's ad, she made the same investment, but she changed up the ad just a little bit to feature the fact that she is now an author, and she made an offer for a free book. And those leads jumped from about 15 a week to up to 500 a week on the same investment. It gives you instant differentiation, makes you an instant authority, and it is never thrown out. Think about that one for just a minute. People just never throw away books. Think about how many times you've moved offices, or maybe even you've moved to a new home, and you've got these books that you've never even read, but there's just something about us that keeps us from throwing books away, right? And so it's never thrown out. Unlike business cards, it's never thrown out. It also helps get speaking engagements. I think Thomas had mentioned something about speaking. Do we have any folks in here that are speakers or aspiring speakers? Fantastic. Good. Well, I noticed several ladies' hands went up. You know, there is literally a critical shortage of female speakers. There's about 1,000 male speakers for every female speaker. And so one of the big things that happens when you author a book is that it opens up doors for speaking engagements. Obviously, it helps you close more sales. And one of the big things that a book can do for any entrepreneur is to help them open doors that would otherwise be difficult to open. How many of you believe that in your business, if you could get to the decision maker, that you could sell to that decision maker? You believe that? If you can get to the decision maker, you can sell to that decision maker. Well, how many of you know that sometimes it's not very easy to get to the decision maker? Right? Typically, they have a platoon of people that are in between you and them that keep you from getting to them. A book is a very effective tool in actually being able to get to the decision maker. In fact, this is one of our authors that was able, in a 30-day period, she was able to schedule face-to-face meetings with 28 CEOs. So, I know we're getting a little close to lunch, so what I want you to do right now is I want you to turn to the person that is to your left. Your left, not my left, your left. Give them a high five. Give them a high five and say, you can do this. Some of y'all figured that out all by yourself. All right. So I want to tell you about some of the things that we believe, all right, as a non-typical publishing company. A couple of biases that we have. Number one, we believe that you should publish your book yourself. Okay? We don't think that people should go the route of traditional publishers. Think about that for just a minute. Typically, a publisher will only accept about 1 out of every 3,000 to 5,000 books that's put in front of them. So what happens is, aspiring authors, when they want to go the traditional route, what they have to do is basically grovel at the feet of the publisher and beg to be the next one, the next chosen one, right? We believe that in this day of, we're in the information age, we have the technology, et cetera, we just believe that there's no reason for any aspiring author to have to go and grovel at the feet of a traditional publisher. We just believe that you should just publish the book yourself. We also believe that you should focus on more than just the sale of books. A lot of times people think that when you write a book, the way that you're going to make money from being an author is on the actual sale of the book. And certainly, you do make a few bucks on the sale of a book, but there's so much money around a book that really the money that's around the book is much more profitable than the book itself. So J. Conrad Levinson, he's with the book Guerrilla Marketing. He said, someone once asked me how much I made for my first book. The answer that he gave was $10 million. Made $10 million from his first book. Now, the book itself only paid him $35,000 in royalties, but the speaking engagements, spin-off books, newsletters, columns, boot camps, consulting, and wide open doors resulted in the remaining $9,965,000. So the message here is that there's so much money around the book that we need to look at more than just the sale of the book itself, right? Another bias that we have, another one of our opinions as a non-traditional publisher, is that you should get other people to pay for everything associated with your book. And I'm getting the same looks right now that I typically get when I mention this, but really there is a system by which you can have the entire, everything needed to pay for your book to be paid for by others. Let's look at an example of a relatively simple book. This is the example. This is a book that was recently written by Jerry Robert. This is not, War and Peace. It's a simple, typical business book, right? As a consultant, I tell all the people, and particularly people I coach with, I tell them that I personally have committed to read 3 to 5 business or sales, self-improvement, leadership type books per month, right? So if I read 3 to 5 books per month, what kind of books do you think I look at when I pick up books so that I can fulfill my commitment to read 3 to 5 books a month? I don't look, well, there's no big examples, but I don't look for War and Peace, right? I mean, I'm a businessman, right? I'm a businessman. I like to stay on top of what's happening. What are the trends? What are the new thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. I like to read. I read anywhere from 3 to 5, sometimes as many as 10 books a month. But 3 to 5 is what I've guaranteed myself. And so just automatically, subconsciously, without ever thinking about it, I automatically kind of gravitate to smaller books, right? So really, for business purposes, today, right now, this may not always be true, but today, your smaller books about like this are really the hot thing, okay? So this book, if you print 2,000 copies of a book this size, you're looking at about 94 cents each to print those. I mean, think about how much you've spent on brochures and how much more powerful a book is than a brochure. So an example of publishing a book yourself, obviously these numbers could change and fluctuate a little bit, but just as an example, if the cover design was going to cost you about $500 to have that done, and then the layout another $500, editing $500, printing $2,000 like we just talked about a second ago, you'd have a total investment of about $3,500. But what you would hold in your hands would be physical assets, those books, that would be worth anywhere up to $40,000. So really, if you think about return on investment, if you think about a good investment, having those physical books is a very good investment compared to what it would cost you to have it published. And so I always like to show this video because really what I'm hoping is at this point, you've heard a lot about life cycle marketing. You've heard a lot about growing business. Now, we're talking about having a tool to put your business on steroids, to put your marketing efforts on steroids. And so my hope at this point is that you all, with just cause, are really beginning to think about what your life would look like when you become wealthy. Right? So this little short video is to just give you an example of what we want to make sure doesn't happen to you after you start making a lot of money. And it doesn't need any sound, but it's a good chance for me to adjust my sound. Yeah, so let's not have you make that kind of mistake, right? When you start making a lot of money and things like that. So now, one of the things that we do at Black Card Books, like I said, we are a non-traditional publisher. And one of the things that we really want to do is help people understand the whole idea, the whole concept of really your business growing to a point where maybe you've never even really imagined and what can happen for you, okay? And so this is where I like to tell people just a little bit about Jerry Robert, because Jerry Robert is our publisher. He is the main, the brains behind Black Card Book. Jerry Robert grew up in absolute poverty, okay? And some of you may have heard a little bit about Jerry's story, but he grew up in absolute poverty. His family was on all kinds of government assistance programs, welfare, this and that. And so he just grew up really having no concept of what it would be like to actually make money. Well, what happened was, he, through a long story short, he was able to associate with some real good quality mentors, right? With some people that would help him to understand that he didn't need to continue thinking small, right? Just like you and I, we need to understand that we don't benefit anyone when we think small. We don't benefit anybody when we keep our business small. We don't benefit anybody when we don't do all the things that we could do. We don't benefit anybody when we don't grow to what we could become. And so Jerry was able to get connected to some people that helped him understand some of those things. And so what happened was he got to the point where he's making about $100,000 a year. You got to understand, for somebody that grew up in abject poverty, $100,000 a year is a lot of money. Well, his mentor told him, no, that's crap. I mean, that's not a lot of money. That's nothing, right? And his mentor told him to think bigger, think bigger, think bigger. And so what happened is Jerry began this lifelong pursuit with thinking bigger, thinking bigger, thinking bigger. And this is one of the things that we do to help our authors, right? We help our authors to understand that there is value in you and I thinking bigger. There's value in you and I doing more, right? So he got to the point where he's making about $100,000 a year. He then figured out that writing a book would be a great business tool, right, to help him catapult his business. Well, then he went to making about $1 million a year. Now, just imagine what happens in the mind of a guy that grew up in abject poverty and is now making $1 million a year. And really, that's one of the whole things behind Black Card Books, is that Black Card Books is owned and operated by a person who grew up in abject poverty and today wants to help other people break out of that and maximize their own potential. Well, what's happened since then is now it's not unusual for Jerry to generate about $1 million in any given weekend. He circles the globe about 5 times a year. Not unusual at all for him to pull in about $1 million in a weekend. And over the course of his business has generated $100 million. Now, if we look at what's happening with Black Card Books, we believe that there's a lot of factors in why Black Card Books is growing so fast. And one of them is, we live in the information age. People are figuring out that they don't need to go and grovel at the feet of a publisher and ask for their book to be published, right? Well, Black Card Book is growing at a scale where we are very much in track over the next couple of years to generate $100 million per year. And we do that with our authors, right? That's how we do that, is we do it with our authors. So some people have said, well, with Jerry making all this money, why doesn't he just retire? And this little video is going to give you a little picture. Those of us that work with Jerry, we don't want him to retire because he's a troublemaker, okay? And if he had that much free time on his hands, who knows what kind of trouble he would get into. So let me just show you what would happen with Jerry if he was to actually retire. All right, so the first video that we shared with you was about things that we don't want you to do when you have a lot of money, but that video, any of you that feel like doing something like that after you're retired, I always said when I was a lawmaker, I always said that one of the laws that we should actually make is that once you turn 80, no laws apply to you, right? Once you turn 80, you can do anything you want. And so for those of you that make it to 80, we would suggest that you have that kind of fun. So this slide is just to show you a little bit about some of the authors that we've recently worked with and show you a little bit about the success that they've had. And the reason it says proof on there is not to show you the proof of Black Card Books, but to show you the proof that everyday people, normal business owners, entrepreneurs, parents, stay-at-home moms, career women, gentlemen, I mean, those book covers, those book titles represent people from literally every walk of life. High-level professionals, there's probably even some ditch diggers up there. I mean, people from every walk of life have successfully put together a book and published it themselves. Now, I can't play that trick on you where everybody looks to the left, but really look at somebody and just tell them you can't do this. I mean, tell somebody that you can do this. You can do this. All right, so now we talked about you can do this, right? And I know that you can do this because I've seen people that really walked into one of our workshops, one of our boot camps, really believing that they didn't have the ability to write a book. But anybody can write a book. I know this. Anybody can write a book. So what is it that stops people? Why don't people write books? Let me ask you this. How many of you have ever thought about the thought of writing a book or someone having said to you, you should write a book? How many of you that thought has ever come across your mind? You've thought about writing a book. Okay, keep your hands up if you've thought about writing a book. Okay, keep your hand up if that thought has been in your mind, say, for example, for a year or more. Keep your hand up if you've had that thought for a year or more. How about 5 years or more? 10 years? 15? I feel like it's an auction. 20? Anybody had 20? All right, so here's a high bidder right here. Let's all give them a round of applause. So really, what is it that stops people from writing a book? I think people think too much about writing a book. And I don't want to pick on anybody. The reason that we had everybody raise their hands, before I went to one of the boot camps, I really didn't think I had thought about writing a book. I'd thought about writing a book for years. But I didn't think I would have the ability to do it, right? Now I know that not only myself, but anybody can write a book. And so I think what happens is people tend to think about it too much. They overthink it. And so what I want to share with you right now is, as you can see, this hat right here is what's currently stopping you from writing a book. And this hat represents what you're going to be like after you've been to the weekend workshop, the boot camp on writing a book. And so I just want to show you what's going to happen after you've been to the weekend workshop. Okay, yep, there you go. You can't do it. Oh. So the fact of the matter is, you can write a book. I'm telling you, I've seen so many different people successfully write books now that I know that anybody can write a book. See, this is what happens right here, is that people think their book has to look like that, right? I mean, instead of looking like this, they think it's got to look like that. And did you see the title of that book? Here's the catch. Every single page in that book is blank. All right, so what is it that keeps people from writing a book? This is it. People think that their book is going to have to be world-changing, earth-shattering, industry-revolutionizing, personality-altering, history-making, incomprehensibly complicated, and it's something that is totally original, with never-before-heard-of content, massively sized, masterfully written, in perfect English, one of a kind, without one single spelling mistake. Right? Let me just tell you, since I became an author, I've met so many other authors, and I read books differently now. How many of you all ever noticed that when you read a book, do you think you've ever read a book that did not contain a spelling or grammatical error or a typo? Have any of you ever read a perfect book? But don't say the Bible. Okay. How many of you have ever, it just doesn't happen, right? So what happens is people think that they have to just come up with this great, perfect book, when in fact what you need to do is get started. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how to open the door to making money from a book. Now, we're not going to open the door for you the way that this guy does, but we are going to open the door for you. I love that video. I've seen that video so many times, and you can never watch that video and not laugh, right? It's like that. It just never, ever gets old. All right. So I'm going to give you a little preview of what the weekend workshop looks like. I'm going to share with you 8 steps to publishing success. Now, These 8 steps are going to be very instrumental. If today is the only thing that you ever attend, this will give you a glimpse, okay, of what would be involved in successfully publishing a book. And I'm going to give you the web address where you can download these slides and stuff like that. But really, it's just going to give you a little preview of what happens at one of our weekend workshops. So in the 8 steps, the first thing that you and I need to think about when it comes to writing a book is what is our primary objective? What is it that we want the book to accomplish for us? And I want to pause there for just a second because this is an area where most aspiring authors, when you think about writing a book for business purposes, most aspiring authors get tripped up on this first step, and that is to figure out what you want the book to do for you. This particular author, his primary objective was to get more publicity. He knew that if he could get more publicity, that he would be able to have more patients, right? And so he wrote a book, here it is, and as you've seen this scrolling over the last minute or so, he received a tremendous amount of publicity as a result of writing that book, and his practice skyrocketed. So when you think about what it is that you would want a book to do for you, obviously here's some possibilities, but you can also think of specifically, okay, if I wrote a book, if I had a book as a credibility tool, what would I want that book to do for me? What is my primary objective? And so that really is the first thing that you and I, you want to go back to this hand? Okay, but don't ask me to do that again. And just so you know, all these slides, I'm going to give you a web link where you can download all these slides, right? Everything that I'm going to share with you today, you can just go back and review it over and over. That'll save you a little space on your smartphone and stuff like that. Although you're certainly welcome to take pictures. So step number 1 is to figure out what is your primary objective. What do you want the book to do for you? Step 2, obviously, is you have to write it. You got to have good content, right? I mean, you can't have bad content. So here's an example. This is one of our authors. He wanted to. He's a CPA, and what he wanted was to be able to give after-dinner business talks, right? That was just something that he wanted to do. He wanted to launch a career where he would do after-business, like companies would hire him at an event to come and speak after dinner. And so he wrote a book of jokes. And you know what he did? This book is nothing more than a compilation of jokes that he found on the internet and just put them in a book. And you know what he does? Now, he gets paid up to $5,000 a night, and here's what he does. He literally sits on a chair like this, and he reads jokes out of his book. And he gets paid to do that. You all want to hear one of the jokes that's in his book? Anybody going to be offended by Viagra jokes? So some of you have probably already heard this before, but one of the ones that's in his book is he talks about how little Johnny finds a brand new box of Viagra. I mean, it's still got the plastic sealing it and everything. I mean, it's a brand new box of Viagra. And Johnny takes it home to his dad and says, Dad, look what I found, a brand new box of Viagra. He says, Dad, I'll sell it to you for $100. And his dad says, son, I don't need that. Go talk to Grandpa, right? So he goes a couple of doors down, where Grandpa lives, and he tells Grandpa, he says, Grandpa, look, I found a brand new box of Viagra. It's still got the plastic on it. I'll sell it to you for $100. Grandpa says, well, I've been hearing about that stuff. I don't know. He said, this is what I'll do. He said, you leave it with me. I'll try it out. And if I agree that it's good, I'll pay you your $100. Johnny says, okay, all right. So he leaves it with him. A couple days later, he goes back over to Grandpa's, knocks on the door, and says, Grandpa, how'd that Viagra work out? He goes, it worked out pretty well. Johnny reaches in his pocket, and he hands Johnny $500. And Johnny says, well, Grandpa, thank you. I told you it would be $100, right? Grandpa says, well, yeah, the $100 is for me. That's the deal we made, right? But the other $400 is from Grandma. All right. So when you're talking about getting the right content for a book, sometimes people get stumped, right? They think, oh man, I don't know if I'm an expert in any particular field. And first I would tell you that you are more of an expert than you might think in a variety of fields, right? A lot of times people don't give themselves the credit that they really do deserve, but I promise you that you are enough of an authority in some area to write a good, decent book. But if you have a hard time believing that, one of the things that you could do as a method for writing your book is to literally just be a reporter. How How many of you have heard of the book Think and Grow Rich? I've been in a room like this. A lot of people have heard of Think and Grow Rich, right? Did you know that Napoleon Hill was just a broke reporter when he wrote that book? He wrote that book by interviewing other people that were wealthy. And he became, now everybody knows the name Napoleon Hill, right? But Napoleon Hill was not wealthy when he wrote the book Think and Grow Rich. He was basically a reporter. And that's what this young fellow right here, you'll hear me talk a little bit more about him in a minute, but he's just a real super young guy, and this is the book that he wrote. Millionairehood, How to Cut the Time for Financial Success in Half. And you know what he did? He just interviewed other people that were already successful, and it has just catapulted his business like crazy. So step number 3 is to design an awesome cover. Now the reason the cover is important is, you all know this, right? I mean, it's why we have this expression that says, don't judge a book by its cover. Now, why do we have that expression, don't judge a book by its cover? Because that's what we do, right? It's normal for us to judge a book by its cover. And so what happens is people see your cover long before they ever see your content. And so that's why it's important to have something that's going to catch the person's eye and draw them to your book. Here are some examples of some book covers that we've recently done with our authors, right? As you can see, these are some pretty eye-catching covers. Now here's another example of a gentleman that came to one of our weekend boot camps, and he said, well, I've already written my book, and here it is. And we asked him, we said, well, how's that working out for you? Which, by the way, I'll give you a couple of free things today, like that you can do if you're going to be consulting or coaching people. These will be free, okay? Like a golden question that you can ask if you're ever coaching or consulting somebody is this one. How's that working out for you? Right? Because whatever you argue for, you get to keep. And people always want to do things, they want to continue to do things their way, the way that it's not working. And so basically what we said to this guy is, well, how's that working out for you? He said, well, it's not. It really wasn't doing anything for his business. And so what we did was we just reworked it, basically the same content. I mean, we helped him rewrite it a little bit, but it was basically the same content, but with this cover. Which one do you think would have more of an impact on your business if you were using pretty obvious, right? So when you're developing the cover, one of the things that you can keep in mind is that humor sells. So humor sometimes makes for a good cover. So does something a little bit provocative, right? Speaking of provocative. Is that provocative enough for you? I don't know that you need to go quite that far with your book, but first time I saw that, I thought it was going to be a promotion for appropriate spanking. Right? So anyway, all right, step number 4. And this is where you really start talking about making money, right? Because remember what Thomas was saying? The money is in the database, right? So step number 4 is to use your book to capture leads. So what we suggest to people is that you create a small, what we call landing page, right? That has a little bit of information about the book so that you can offer the book for free. Maybe even in that landing page have a short, maybe a 30-second video. Show you an example of one that we did for one of our authors recently. So Joe Turner is one of our authors, and she used her book to be able to, she made that landing page, included that video. Of course, we do a lot of that with and for our authors. And so she ended up, she's in Australia, but she ended up on the Australian version of Good Morning America, talking about her book. And so one of the things that we want to try to help people to understand is that once you have written a book, once you have the status of author, it automatically elevates you in ways that are difficult to imagine before actually becoming an author, right? It's actually pretty amazing. So step number 5 is to boost your sales. And tell me this, how many of you are entrepreneurs, business owners? Okay, great, all right. So let me ask you something. How many of you have been involved in sales for more than just a couple of years? If you've been involved in sales for more than just a couple of years. So let me ask you something. The people that we sell to, aren't they more and more looking like this guy? Have you ever noticed how the person that you're trying to sell to looks more and more like this guy? I don't know if there's just something happening in that evolutionary process where people are starting to look more and more that way. But really what it's all about is that people now are much more skeptical than they used to be, right? So one of the things that we suggest to people when it comes to using a book is that you use a book to differentiate yourself. And I don't want to pick on any real estate agents. I won't even ask how many real estate agents we have in the room. But one of the things you see very commonly, particularly in the real estate profession, but really a lot of other professions as well, is this idea of maybe having a business card that's a little bit different, right? And certainly that could aid in differentiating. But take a look at this business card compared to these business cards, and then compare it to you. Instead of handing this business card to a client, you hand them this. Which one do you think is going to be much more impactful on your prospective client? Does it make sense? I mean, this is not an idea that I'm having to twist your arm over. I mean, this is so much more powerful. If I'm new to an area and I'm needing to buy a home, I'm needing to hire a real estate agent, you better believe that the real estate agent that hands me this, or if I'm needing to sell a house, the real estate agent that hands me this, compared to the real estate agent that hands me that, which one do you think is going to get my business? It's the one with the book, right? Because of what it automatically does. So this is another example of one of our authors. She wrote a book on the power of pets. It's really kind of a cool book. But she was able to use that book to do interviews, and she made 89 calls. This is a person that was not involved in sales prior to starting to write her book. She made 89 calls, and out of those 89 calls, she was able to book 82 interviews. This is one of our authors over in the UK. And so what we suggest to our authors is we say, send it to famous people you know. Send a copy of your book to famous people you know, and just put a little note in it, just handwrite it on the inside of the book, right? And so she sent a copy of hers to the Queen. And so the Queen wrote her a letter back. Now, the Queen is not able to endorse a book, but she did say the Queen was interested to read about the reason behind the writing of your book and thought kind of you to send her a gift. Now, that's not an endorsement, but it's a pretty nice thing to be able to say about your book, right, in terms of notoriety. So then she ended up on having a big newspaper article about her. She's a counselor, okay, and her counseling business multiplied exponentially once she began to get this type of notoriety. So another one is, if you have a prospect, right, maybe a high-level prospect, is that you can take your book, write a short note on the inside of that book before you make your sales call to that person. Okay? So think of all the sales calls that the people you're trying to get to receive on a weekly basis, but think about that same prospect having gotten a copy of your book with a handwritten note on the inside of it, and then you make your sales call. Step 6 is to get free publicity, and that's something that can literally happen globally. Here's that, remember that young kid that we talked about before? Wrote that book by being a reporter. Well, here he is, huge article. There, I mean, I'm not even sure this guy shaves more than twice a week. Right? This lady is an insurance salesperson, had a decent practice, but nothing crazy. She wrote this book for the purpose of getting notoriety, ended up having all these interviews, and now her insurance agency has skyrocketed. This lady was a retiring school teacher and wanted to get into the coaching business, working with women. And her book helped her to get the kind of notoriety that actually ended up having her stuff featured in Time magazine. Again, here's Mary Beth that we talked about a minute ago with the book about pets. I mean, look at this kind of notoriety. What do you think would happen for your business, your sales, your ability to sell when you have this kind of notoriety going on? Here's another young guy. This guy probably only shaves about once a month. And so he writes this book, starts getting this type of notoriety. Obviously, he's a real estate agent. And here you see, here's him, same publication, right? This is the one page, this is the next page. Here he is being featured as an author. He's in Malaysia. And then here's a picture of the Prime Minister. Now check that out. Here's this young kid, author, in the same publication as the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister gets a picture this big. The author gets a picture that big. There he is again. And once again, look, folks, you can do this. Right? I mean, one of the reasons that I am willing to travel around and talk to people about this is because I know, number one, you can do this, and I know, number two, what kind of an effect this is going to have on your business, whatever your entrepreneurial endeavors are. I know that this is going to make a big difference for you. So here's Mary Beth again. She got a quick word for us.
My name is Mary Beth Haynes, and becoming an author has completely changed my life. I've gotten free publicity, and the best part is that I've been able to raise enough money to pay for the whole thing. It's incredible.
Yeah, in fact, Mary Beth did not come from a sales background, but she is so good at the process we use. We have the authors that we actually work with, we have a process by which we teach those authors and help them to be able to get their book entirely funded. She's so good at it that we've actually brought her on now as the coach that teaches people how to do that same thing. So step number 7 is to get people to pay for everything. Here's an example of one of our authors that was at a conference, and they found out that she was the author of an about to be released book, and they had her just come up and talk a little bit about her book. At that conference, she handed out some order forms and sold $5,100 worth of her books before the book was ever done. Okay, and that's one of the things that we teach our authors to do is how to fund the book before it's ever written. One of the ways that you can get your book funded is to sell ads in the back of your book for people that want to also sell to the same people that might be reading your book. Here's an example of how that looks. So you can see these are people that would have an interest in selling to the same target population that this book is written to, and so those people advertise in the back of her book. The other idea is to sell a bonus chapter in your book. You've seen this book just a minute ago. That's the insurance agent. Wrote a book about protecting seniors. And then what she did was she found a law firm that specialized in working with seniors. And she sold that law firm the ability to have a chapter in her book featuring the law firm for $7,500. So there's just a lot of different ways that we teach people to be able to actually fund their book. Now, maybe one of the most important things that I will say to you in our brief time together is this. This is something that I've said this so many times now that I'm about to warn it out. But it is so true, and that is that wealthy people decide quickly and rarely change their minds, while broke people make decisions slowly and change their mind often. And I would just encourage you to think about some wealthy people that you know and think about some broke people that you know, and you will see that this holds true every time. Wealthy people decide quickly and rarely change their minds. Broke people make decisions slowly and change their minds often. Now remember, I promised you that you could download these slides. All you got to do is go to 8steps.pptx, and you can have all these slides. 8steps.pptx. Let's see if you can keep from smiling when I like this. So I was watching you, and I noticed that everybody in the room smiled. When I show that, anybody that doesn't smile, I usually ask them to leave because that means there's something wrong with them. So anyway, let me tell you a little bit about the boot camp that we put on. And I do want to tell you, at this boot camp, the purpose of the weekend boot camp is not to sell you another seminar. You are going to learn everything that you need to know at that boot camp, period. You're going to walk away from that boot camp knowing everything that you need to know to self-publish, to be done with it, and have your book in process and done once and for all. Okay? I want to be very clear about this because I would not work for a company that does, these boot camps that then, you know what I'm saying? We don't do that, all right? Everything you need to know is going to be taught at this boot camp. It basically has 5 parts. We'll talk about each of those very briefly. So the first portion is Friday night, and it's called Plan It, right? That's where we're going to teach you to get the right book. First of all, you got to figure out which book you're going to write, and the way that we help you to pick that is by figuring out which one is the fastest path to the biggest cash. Remember, our whole philosophy is that there's a whole lot more money around the book than there is in the book, right? So we're going to teach you the fastest path to the biggest cash. We're going to help you figure out which book to write or which book to write first. Then on Saturday, we're going to talk about writing it, right? And so one of the things that's going to happen, and this blows people's minds, remember I said that anybody can write a book? We are literally going to show you, teach you, you will learn how to write a book in 40 hours. We have a cookie cutter system. This is very important. We have a cookie cutter system. You will have a full workbook. You'll have all the resources you need. A cookie cutter system that takes you step 1, step 2, step 3, exactly how to write a book. It formats everything for you. And really what it does, probably more than anything, is it helps you to actually see, for real, that writing a book is not a big, hairy process. It really is not. It's a step-by-step procedure that we teach you exactly how to do. You will learn how to write a book in 40 hours. Also on Saturday, we're going to talk about funding your book. We touched on that just a little bit a minute ago. We're going to teach you, you're going to learn exactly how to fund your book. Remember those investments or expenses that we talked about earlier, the printing and the design cover and all that kind of stuff? There's going to be a little bit of an investment in writing your book, but we're going to teach you, you're going to learn exactly how to fund that book so that it's paid for and you're not taking money out of your pocket to get it done. Now you remember that young guy, one of the 2 young guys that we were talking about a minute ago? I want you to just hear quickly.
Hi Jerry, just want to thank you for what you taught me during the boot camp in March this year. To give you an update on my progress, to date I've raised more than 15,000 Singapore dollars in terms of sponsorships and pre-sold more than 600 books, not 700, my mistake. But you know what the best part is? I've not even started working on my book yet. So what you really thought? Me is really amazing, and I'm still recovering from a state of shock. Note that I'm able to raise such an amount. I'm only a 22-year-old, still in national service. But like what you always say, when you collect the money, you gotta finish the book lah. So I'm working hard on it now. So I feel so excited for all the participants that will be attending your boot camp next week. They are definitely in for a treat. So hope to see you soon, Jerry. Bye.
All right, so let me give you the interpretation of that. He's very excited that even though he hasn't finished his book, he's been able to raise $15,000 to fund the book and pre-sell 600 copies of the book. Now this is very, very important. In fact, we're going to invest a good bit of time during the boot camp to teach you exactly how to do this. Because it's so important that we all understand, right? We're entrepreneurs, right? We're writing the book because we're entrepreneurs. We're writing the book to use it as a marketing tool. And so it's important to understand that we can do that and have the book paid for, have all the things that we would need to invest in, have that paid for even before the book is finished. We teach our students exactly how to do that. So then also we're going to talk about publishing the book. This is where we talk about all the nitty-gritty details like printing issues, copyright, plagiarism, all that kind of stuff. We'll cover that kind of stuff for you so that you don't have to be worried about that as you get into the process of writing a book. We're going to show you how to get top-level endorsements. We're going to show you how to get other people to write or to sign off endorsements through the book. And then we're going to teach you how to move it, right? Getting the book, we're going to show you that getting the book is actually quite easy. Moving it, that's where there's going to need to be some teaching. So All Day Sunday is on the subject of moving the book. And one of the things to keep in mind is that the success of a book is about 90% marketing and 10% content. I know that the writer types don't really like to hear that, but sometimes just because we don't like to hear something doesn't change the reality of it, right? The reality is that it's about 90% marketing, 10% content, and we're going to be very helpful with you on that. So, we are, as you know, I think most of you probably know that we're going to be conducting one of these boot camps here in the Phoenix area, and I'll have those dates for you on the screen in just a minute. But for those of you that participate in that boot camp, that's in Singapore dollars. Anybody got any Singapore dollars? Bob, can you hand out those forms that actually have U.S. dollars on it? We do these seminars all over the world, and so we have to try to remember what kind of dollars we were talking about last time. But what happens is, when we do these weekend boot camps, as I said before, the purpose of these weekend boot camps is so that you can be absolutely ready to go and write your book. Okay? We're going to empower you with all the knowledge, all the information you need to be able to write your book. Now, for those of you that actually attend the Phoenix weekend, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a couple of bonuses. Okay? First of all, we are going to develop, for any of you that come, we are going to actually develop a book cover for you. Okay? So that you don't end up having a book cover that looks like that one that we showed the comparison on earlier, right? We know there's an actual scientific approach to exactly how a book cover should be designed and developed. We know how to do that. We will develop your book cover for you. Secondly, is you will have the complete online version of the home study course. And what that means is you will physically attend the weekend boot camp here in Phoenix, but also, as soon as you sign up for that weekend boot camp, immediately today, you will have access to the full home version, the online version of the home study course, which means you could actually begin kind of reviewing and studying a bit about the boot camp before you ever even get there. And then obviously, after you've been to the boot camp, you'll have that home study course, which will be the exact same information. You'll have that to be able to review and use even after the boot camp. You're also going to have 100% money-back guarantee. Okay? Now, typically, this course is a $4,500 course. Now, you all been to enough seminars to know that we're going to discount it today, right? You're not going to be shocked when I show you the next slide and then it has a discount. But really, if you think about it, the boot camp itself is easily a $3,000 boot camp. We're talking Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 full days of very, very intense content where you leave fully knowing how to write a book and having all the tools you need to write a book. So what we do at these previews is we discount that to $24.99. So you're going to invest. Remember before we talked about how much you would invest to actually have your books printed? Well, you would invest about that same amount of money. This investment is about $24.99. You would invest that to learn how to write your book and fund your book so that you don't have to pay those expenses that we talked about earlier, right? So instead of paying about $2,400 to design your book, print it, all that kind of stuff, you would pay $24.99 to come to this boot camp. At the end of that boot camp, you not only know exactly how to write a book, you learn the cookie cutter system of writing a book in 40 hours, but you also have learned how to fully fund your book so that you don't ever have to spend another dime on the writing of your book, and most likely, like you heard from several of our authors, raise way more money than it takes to actually print the book, so that your money or your book becomes an asset before it's ever even finished. Okay? So again, the bonuses that you receive is you get us. We will design your book cover for you. If people hire us just to do that, you're talking a couple $1,000s just to do that. Because we have an actual science. This is not guesswork. We don't say, well, maybe it would be good for you to have this or that. We actually have a scientific approach to coming up with a really popping book cover, and also you get the home study course, the online version of the home study course. So obviously I want to encourage you to participate in that. But let me just ask you something. Do any of you wonder why we do these and why we might offer someone to be able to attend for free? Would anybody like to know why we do that? It's very simple. It's not hype. It's not silliness or anything like that. At these weekend boot camps, every single attendee, every person that comes to the boot camp will learn exactly how to write, format, everything about writing your book, publishing it, etc., etc., etc. So that when you leave, you'll be fully equipped to go and get your book done, get it funded, etc., etc., etc. Now, during the process of the weekend, during those 3 days that we're all together, we actually figure out who some of our new authors are going to be. Does that make sense? We're a publishing company, right? So we want to recruit new authors. We want authors to work with us, right? We have a vested interest in having authors, right? So what happens is, what we're willing to do at times like this is we're willing to actually do the weekend boot camp for free. Now there'll be a couple of stipulations, but basically do the weekend boot camp for free because we know that what's going to happen is by the end of that boot camp, we will have identified some of our new authors, right? Now we can't promise you that you're going to be one of those, but if you're not there, it's a lot less likely that you would be one of those, right? And so we have a vested interest in that, and we want to find new authors. So let me ask you something. How many of you would like to take that form and hold it up for me if you would like to actually go to that boot camp for free? Okay? Well, you are all listening. I'm impressed. Right. So listen very carefully. I'm going to give you some instructions about how to actually be able to attend the boot camp for free. Number one, go ahead and fill out that form, which I see most of you have done. And here's what I want you to do. Right there where you can see the price, put an X through that. And in that little white space just below it, write the word real big, write free. And write free nice and big so that there's no question when these are being processed. Talk about the price, we've written free. And now just go ahead and begin filling in the form. We want you to write clearly, and keep in mind, remember earlier I said that you don't have to worry about having spelling exactly correct when you write a book, but you should certainly spell your name correctly. We do want you to get your name correct on this form. So just start filling that out. And we've already talked about the fact that you will, as an attendee at the boot camp, you will have your book cover done for you, and you will have the home study course, the online version of the home study course. I got a little ahead of myself when I told you why we do this, but just to review, we are a publishing company, right? A publishing company does not continue to be successful. And by the way, we are we in the top 3?
We're the fastest growing book publishing company by title acquisition.
We are the fastest growing publishing company by title acquisition in the world, right? Now you don't get that status, you don't become the fastest growing publishing company in that category without recruiting new authors. So remember before I was talking about how people grovel at the feet of a publisher to try to be one of the 3 out of maybe 3,000 to 5,000 that get selected? We don't operate that way. So the reason that we're willing to do this for free is because we know that while we're here for 3 days in Phoenix doing this boot camp, there will be some people who will leave that boot camp and not be one of our new authors, but they will completely have all the information they need to self-publish, to do everything, to get the book funded, et cetera, et cetera. But we also know there will be a few people that we actually take on as our new partners, okay, and that we become the publisher for. So it's very simple. It's not rah-rah. That's why we do it. So the date of the Phoenix area boot camp is March 6th through 8th. So that's coming up right away. Now we do these boot camps literally all over the world. Okay, we do them all over North America, all over the world. So obviously today our emphasis is on March 6th through 8th. But for any of you that might not be able to make it to that particular day, once you sign up today, that's good for a year, right? So you could actually pick any of the locations where we're going to have it. And I think Phoenix is one of the places that we relatively regularly come back to. So obviously we want to kind of focus on that particular day, but do keep in mind that your registration is good for a year, which means you could go to any of the other locations. And we do come back to Phoenix from time to time. All right, so for those of you that held up that you want to do this for free, here's what I want you to do. Hold up your form. Hold up your form. All right. Okay, stand up. If you're holding your form up, stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. All right, follow me. Follow me back here. Let's go see Bob. Bob is way smarter than I am, and Bob is going to help with some of the technical aspects of what we're doing. And so Bob is going to help you to kind of get this figured out, filled out, et cetera, et cetera. What do we need to do, Bob?
Well, there's a couple of stipulations.
Oh, that's right. Y'all want to hear about a couple of minor stipulations as far as doing this for free?
Yes, we do.
Yes?
Yeah.
This means yes. This means no. Okay.
Let's hear this then.
All right. So here's the way it works. So there's two small requirements. Whoops.
Going too fast.
I think my clicker bounced off of her forehead. All right. So here's what we have to do. We are going to make the investment ahead of time. We're going to print out the workbooks, the handouts. We're going to rent the room. There's going to be food throughout the weekend. Okay. And so we basically kind of figured out what it costs us to put these things on. And basically we're looking at about $97 to do that. And so what you would need to do is just pay like a processing